Good morning. It's Creative Mornings. We have Maddie Hicks today to talk to us about spirituality. We're super excited. What is spirituality to you?
Spirituality is a lot of things, but I'm mainly focusing on a banana theme today, which we'll kind of dig into in my talk.
All right, let's bananify this.
Yeah.
Spirituality, it is that time to welcome Maddie to the stage. So let's see what she has to say about spirituality and bananas and everything that makes this world great and exciting and creative. Welcome, Maddie.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be a part of Creative Mornings. I think the work that you all do to connect and to share stories is so important, and I'm just really grateful to be here and to be a part of it. A little bit about me before we dig into spirituality. I am a multimedia artist. I primarily work in theater and film, but I also experiment with puppetry, with storytelling, with performance art. And my big project the last few years that I'll be referencing through our conversation today is my first feature film. It's called Sunshine Girls. Sunshine Girls, thank you. Sunshine Girls is a queer love story set in a pastel, candy-coated dystopia where the world is literally suffocating due to a lack of oxygen. And to combat this, science and medicine has created a procedure allowing women's reproductive systems to host photosynthesis and cellular respiration, allowing them to give birth to air itself. There's love, there's horror, there is a lesbian cheese grating scene. But most importantly, it's about women and queer people as life givers, both in and outside of the confines of motherhood. I feel like a lot of the work that I do, like Sunshine Girls and a lot of my other works, are like really deeply spiritual, but maybe not in the kind of like cookie cutter way that we tend to think of spirituality. But I have a feeling, and I could be wrong, that this is not like a cookie cutter audience, right? So I think it's going to be okay if maybe we talk about spirituality, but we make it a little bit weird. So first, let's look at just kind of like the textbook definition here. And there's a lot of different definitions of spirituality, but what it comes down to is any sort of experience that's like bigger than yourself. So connecting to something like greater in the universe. And this is the first image that comes up on Google when you search spirituality. So if I came up to you and I said, hey friend, I just saw like the most mind-blowing work of art at Kindling Arts Festival this weekend, and it was so spiritual, I want you all to close your eyes, like actually close your eyes, and I want you to imagine what you see, what you think that work of art was that was so spiritual. Think as specifically as you can in terms of color palette, the medium, the mood. Okay, now open your eyes and be honest here. Show of hands. How many people here pictured a woman in a papier-mâché banana head with ukulele? How many? 3, 4, 10? None? Like me neither, right? So when I think of like spiritual art, I tend to think of like blues and grays and blacks. I think of like modern dancers wearing like turtlenecks, and they're like doing the thing where they like pull their face in like all of these really interesting ways, and it's super dramatic and it's serious and it's philosophical. That's what I think of, right? This is a piece I did last year for Music City Puppet Slam, and if you haven't been to a puppet slam, what a delight. I would encourage you to do so. There's a small but mighty puppeting community here in Nashville. Email me and I will connect you. So this was a piece I did that I think is spiritual, and let me explain why. So This was the first puppet slam since like COVID started, and we were really excited to get together in person and try new works. And puppet slams are really about being like loose. You're like getting on stage and trying something new. They're usually like short form, very creative. And I wanted to do something that was like super personal, okay? And we were inside this little frame here on the side to begin. So I'm Baby Banana, the hand puppet. And Baby Banana has spent her whole life thinking about all the things that a banana should be. And this is like reinforced by society and the media. And the number one thing that a banana should be is funny. Because think about it. Bananas, they're bright yellow, they're phallic, they're used in physical comedy for banana phones and banana guns and like slipping on a banana peel. Bananas are supposed to be funny. And Baby Banana has internalized this ever since she was born. And then one day, Baby Banana finds like forbidden literature, which is a science textbook, which can stop you from being funny if you're not careful. Baby Banana reads this and she learns, and this is true, that bananas share 50% of the same DNA as human beings. Banana is absolutely, her whole sense of self shatters, right? And I go from being a small Baby Banana hand puppet to emerging from behind the puppet stage, and I screamed, which wasn't planned, but it just came over me. I screamed, "I'm half woman!" And then I put on the banana head, and I get my ukulele, and I play a really sloppy cover of Lucy Dacus's "I Don't Want to Be Funny Anymore," because Baby Banana realizes if she's half woman, she could be taken seriously. She could be a poet. She could be a doctor, a scientist, an artist. And as silly and like absurd as this like was, it also touches this very like spiritual, very like tender human idea of like, who are we? Who are we told to be? Who do we want to be? What if we completely shatter that sense of self and become something new and something big and brave? And so I want today, with you all collectively, I want to reimagine spirituality, and I want to bananify it. So we're going to make it colorful, bright, we're going to make it weird, we can make it funny, and it can still be as spiritual, and it can still be as valid as dancers in turtlenecks doing like face things, right? Like we can all belong, we can all work in spirituality. So that is our mission for today. We are going to bananify it. So we're going to now go back in time, back into the 1990s. This is me as a kid, and as you can see, I've been bananifying things my entire life. This second picture, I like to imagine there was like a buffet of art supplies, like pom-poms and sequins, and like they put out some googly eyes just in case. And like, what a choice I made here. Like, I can guarantee no adult in that room like encouraged me to do so. Really like avant-garde, right? So I've been bananifying things forever. I was like a very goofy kid. I was always telling stories and singing songs. But alongside that, I was also deeply sensitive and thoughtful and a little introverted. And I really related to the idea of Baby Banana, of wanting to be both things at once. I want to be goofy, but I want to be thoughtful. I want to be spiritual. I want to be all the things. And one reason I'm wanting to go back and kind of look through that like childhood lens today is because I realized like really early on, thinking through this theme, that I can't have like a genuine conversation with you all about spirituality without going back into like my first sort of like exposure to any kind of religion, right? Because that has absolutely influenced the rest of my life. I grew up here in Middle Tennessee in the Bible Belt, and I had a very sort of traditional Christian upbringing. So church on Sunday morning, youth group on Wednesday night. Let's see who had that similar experience here. Yes. And we're all in therapy. Yeah, so very traditional. I went to a non-denominational church in Hendersonville, which wasn't as extreme as some of my friends' experiences. But I really, as an adult, like deconstructed a lot of that like sort of like religion that I was exposed to. But I think that there are some things from that we can take and we can maybe reimagine and bananify and use them as tools. And maybe you have a very healthy relationship with your religious upbringing, which is fantastic if you do. Maybe you're comfortable where you are. I still think that you can take something from kind of like re-examining your ideas around these concepts. So when I think about my experience in the church, these are some of the ideas that I think could be really powerful, beautiful things. So faith, community, ritual, wonder, and purpose. This is what we're going to bananify today. So the first idea that I want to look at is this idea of faith. And that's a very loaded word, especially if you have had maybe like a painful departure from religion, okay? And you might be wondering, what does this giant rock hole in the ground have to do with faith? And I will tell you. So at my church camp, I went to church camp for like 3 or 4 years in a row in elementary school. We had a lot of the normal, like standard camp activities. So we had fishing and friendship bracelets and all of that good stuff. But there was also an activity at my church camp, which I realized after talking to other people not at my church camp, this was weird. We had an activity called the crevice, which was where children, if they were faithful enough, if they believed in Jesus enough, would go down into a deep, cavernous rock hole. What? How bizarre. It's really just in the last several years that I've been like, didn't you guys do the crevice at your camp? And people will be like, are you okay? The first couple years I went to church camp, it was like an absolute no from me. And it was optional, but you were very much like encouraged by the adults and the other children around you, like, believe, go down, go down. And so I know, I really worked myself up to it. I think it was like my 3rd year at camp, like, I'm going to do the crevice. I love Jesus, and I trust him, and I'm going to do it. And let me just really paint the scene for you all. So, because you're probably wondering, how does this work? I was like 11, and when you first get to sort of like the ledge here, there's a guy that greets you. His name is like Steve or something. Whatever you're picturing is correct. Steve is the guy who puts the harness around your waist. The other end is like anchored to a nearby tree. It's just you, Steve, and the other kids watching, okay? Then you start to slowly walk backwards and like lower yourself down off the edge. There's like a little carpet landing, but like literally like this steep. I could not find an actual picture of my crevice. It's like it was like a fever dream. I confirmed with people who did the crevice that it was real, but there's no evidence of it. But it was similar to this. You start to go down, and I'm shaking and like on the verge of tears, like terrified. And this is where the other guy comes into play. So there's another guy named like David or something, and he's at the bottom already, and he's like looking up at you, because like pretty soon after you start going down into the crevice, you're in like sheer darkness. And so the guy at the bottom is the one who's looking up and telling you where to put your hands and your feet. And I think it was probably like 15, 20 minutes until I got to the bottom. And there were times when I wanted to give up and stop, and I was so overwhelmed, but I did it. And once I got down to the bottom of the crevice and I was able to like look up at what I had done, I was just like flooded with a sense of empowerment. And of course there was like the adrenaline of it all, and I was excited that I'd done something hard. And yes, this is extremely problematic. But in order to bananify this, I think every creative person, anyone who is an adult who makes art, is familiar with the feeling of going into the unknown, of going down into something that is so dark and scary and you don't know how you're going to do it, and the feeling of getting at the bottom and looking up and feeling just like absolutely like overjoyed, right? I think every big creative project I've ever done feels like going down into a crevice. And making Sunshine Girls, my first feature film, was like the biggest deepest, like darkest crevice ever. I had spent the last like 5 or 6 years making short films, which was kind of my film school. And when it came time to make a feature, I like knew that I didn't know what I was going into, right? And like every sort of like big milestone in the process was like another step down into this crevice. So the first time I had a reading draft printed that I shared, where I had people read it out loud and give me feedback. When we launched crowdfunding, that was a big commitment to this is out there, it's public, and it's happening. That's very vulnerable and scary, right? The first day on set, and the next day on set, and the next day on set, and the next day on set, until we got to our last day of principal photography about a month ago. And now, at this point, it's like being at the bottom of the crevice, and we're looking up at all that we've done, that we didn't know we could do, that was hard and scary, but also like beautiful when we got down to the bottom of it. So I think we can bananify faith into whatever it means to us in our creative process. And now post-production is climbing back up to the top, right? So it's not over once you get down into the crevice, but it is something to celebrate. The next idea that I really valued from like my experience in the church was community. And you guys have a community here, which is so lovely. When I think about community, like in my church experiences, like the best parts of it were like sitting in the cabin with my friends, staying up late and giggling, or sitting around a campfire, just talking or singing, just spending that time together, having shared ideas and just like people that you can trust, people that you have a really intimate connection to. And that is certainly something that I have bananified into my creative work. Community is so, so important to me. Here are a couple of pictures from Sunshine Girls. Like, we loved each other, right? We still do. We're all alive and here still. But, like, there was something about, like, the bulk of the process, like, coming to an end that was, like, a sort of, like, grieving that happened. This is like our last big day on set with everybody, and I'm hugging Delaney, who's my friend for years now, who I will see again, right? Like, but like I'm like, we're like in tears because we just did this crazy crevice experience, and like that day I actually, we had I think like maybe 50 people on set, and I'm kind of soft-spoken, so I had a megaphone that day. And I have this like idea for a character, like a little bit that's like shy person with megaphone, which is kind of me, where I'm just like, hey guys, let's all get together. But that day I actually cried into like my megaphone just because of like the love and tenderness of these people. And I think if you're in any kind of leadership role in a collaboration, if you're a director or a producer, you are in charge of creating that culture, of like establishing how people treat each other in your community. Is there kindness? Is there patience? Is there room for laughter and joy? Because you can be intensely serious and professional in your work, but still have a community that encourages that. And I feel like that's something that we did really well with Sunshine Girls. The next idea is this idea of ritual. And ritual certainly spans every kind of religious and spiritual practice, right? So it can look like prayer, it can look like meditation, it can be the clothes that you put on your body, the days that you show up for your work. It can be any sort of bananified interpretation that you want, but it has to feel good and authentic to you. So when I was like coming sort of towards the end of my church experience, I was like 13 or 14, and I was like upstairs with the youth group, and I'd had like a horrible day at school, like middle school, right? Not many good days, but it was like an extra bad day, right? And I just wasn't feeling like I wanted to get up with everybody and like sing like the worship song. So I went to the back of the room and I sat down, and I remember just kind of like listening, like reflecting on my day, still being like present, but not like participating in the kind of way that most people were. So we always had like a group of kids like in the front, like with their arms raised up, right? And maybe that is authentic to a lot of people in that practice, but it wasn't to me ever, even on my best day. And this was one of my worst days. And I remember someone from the church came up to me and said, you need to go up there and you need to put your arms up. And that just wasn't me, right? And it didn't feel right. So all of that to say, whatever your ritual is in your creative practice, it needs to fit you. You can Google how to organize your files or like how to build community in a team. But ultimately, like, you have to create rituals that work for you. So one ritual that I created for Sunshine Girls production that I certainly could have found like an online program, but knowing myself and wanting to find the most like exciting, authentic way to do this, organizing our schedule for the spring, I had different color note cards, and I had grouped them by location and by time to prepare and by actor availability and crew availability, and it took up like a huge table, right? So the time-lapse video is me literally writing out the scene names, grouping them by location, sorting them. It looks like absolutely like insane, right? But that's the kind of ritual that I tend to do. I very much like to spend time like preparing for work, especially if I'm going to have a lot of collaborators, and just kind of wrapping my mind around it. That's definitely an important part of my ritual. These are some other examples of rituals that I personally do. So the first picture on the left is my paper puppets. So there was like this sort of weird space between finishing the screenplay for Sunshine Girls and like the first day that we could actually get actors in a room together. And this was before the vaccine had become available. So I didn't feel good about getting a bunch of people together in a room physically. And I wanted to work through all 90 pages and just kind of get comfortable with the pacing and the blocking and the characters. And I heard that Peter Jackson did all of Lord of the Rings with little army figurines. And I was like, that's cool. Bananify, though, I don't want to work with the army. I made my own little people. And another filmmaker who does this that I took inspiration from is Jim Cummings, an independent filmmaker who records like podcast audio of his whole screenplay. So he's like reading every single character, and it's really just for him to kind of work through like the whole scope and scale of the project. So kind of combining these ideas, bananifying them, I made my whole feature film with little paper puppets before we ever like got on the first day of set. Really, it's just like a ritual for me to like get just into that story, into that world. Another ritual in the middle that many of my frequent collaborators are aware of is my lucky sock. And if you look at that sock, you're probably thinking like, that seems to me like something that was like on sale at Old Navy, like for St. Patrick's Day in 2011. Yes, it was. My mom bought me these socks for like school spirit day, right, to wear on St. Patrick's Day, and she probably thought like that was going to be their whole life. But what my like fourth grade self heard was, these are lucky socks. And I was like, yes, of course they are. And like, how have I gotten through this much life without them? So I wore these lucky socks for every basketball game I had in elementary school. And then like anytime I had to give a presentation at school, and then into adulthood, every single day I've been on a film set that I've written, directed, produced, anything, I have one of the lucky socks on. And I say one because another part of the kid magic that I determined that's part of my ritual is that the luck is finite and it gradually wears off. Isn't that tragic? Every time you wear one of them, the luck wears off just a little bit. I don't know how long I have left because it's been about 20 years, but just wearing one sock at a time is like plenty of luck, you know, like don't be greedy, like you've got enough luck with one. And the big toe on one of them has completely worn through. The heel on this one that I'm wearing right now has completely worn through, but it's like part of my ritual to put on the lucky sock in the morning and like acknowledge that like I still have that like kid magic inside of me, and that I want to connect with that and like believe in that, and that like, again, any adult making art has to have some kind of, you know, connection to that, right? It would be crazy to make art otherwise. And the last picture that's also part of my ritual that I've developed is wearing like a tool belt on set. And so for Sunshine Girls, I am a writer, director, and a co-producer. And so not like a role that you would typically wear a tool belt for, but I keep everything that anyone on my set might need. I have clothespins, I have dry erase markers, I have regular pens, I've got little note cards, and I have lavender essential oil for when I get anxious. And it really kind of just, for me, sets the tone of when I walk onto my set, I'm not going to be sitting, in a chair in another room watching a monitor directing you from afar. I'm here, I'm doing the work of the production assistant and the intern and the set designer, and I'm steaming the costumes, and I'm here to support everyone in every way that I can. And that also kind of serves as like a weighted blanket, like that you would put on a nervous dog. So I find like when I'm wearing it on a long day and I take it off to go to the bathroom, I feel like I'm gonna like float away. So it's become kind of like a comforting part of my ritual as well. The next idea that I really valued from my experience in church, and the one that I think is maybe the hardest to access as an adult, is this idea of wonder, of being just absolutely like taken and like blown away by something beautiful. And when you're in like a church space, like a Christian space, you're told all of these wonderful stories, right? Like Noah's Ark. That's amazing if you think about it like in the most sort of like literal way of storytelling. And then like in the sort of like secular culture in the United States of America, we get told lots of other wonderful things like Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy, and there's like a bunny that can like make it to everybody's house to deliver baskets. And so your whole world as a kid is really like rich with wonder. And then we get older and we're paying taxes and we're trying to buy milk and all of these things that kind of get in the way of that wonder. And I find myself sometimes, if I'm stuck in rush hour, like ignoring the sunset, right? So how do we get that wonder as adults? How do we like bananify this and make it feel like real and right to who we are, like regardless of our belief system? And for me, I feel like such a deep, deep feeling of wonder in my creative work. It's also hard and sometimes like repetitive and monotonous and boring and frustrating, but there's also wonder. And I think all of the work leading up to that, it's always worth it. This is one of my favorite pictures on set. That's Harley Walker in the middle, who is our lead actress in Sunshine Girls. And I feel like her face just like embodies like wonder. And I can't tell you like the circumstances, like I don't remember. But you can just see in her face sheer joy and wonder. And that's really like how I want to feel making art. And that's the kind of space I want to create for other artists, where like there are opportunities for wonder. I was thinking about myself and like my like most like wondrous moment on our film set. So we probably shot like, I stopped counting, probably like 20 weekends over the course of a year. So it was a lot, and it was really, really like challenging work. And one day on set, we got to film a series of scenes. This is Pam Marlene Taylor, who is a Nashville CreativeMornings friend, and she is a fabulous fiber artist. And I got her to say yes somehow. I slid into her Instagram DMs, and we got a cup of coffee. And I got her to say yes to helping me create this giant wall-sized weaving. It was like 8 feet tall and like 17 feet long. And Pam led this project with a team of volunteers. We had about 5 people create individual panels that she then connected on the day of filming. And in Sunshine Girls, this is really important visual because we have a character who is grieving a very painful miscarriage. And she doesn't know what to do. She's in this space now in the world of Sunshine Girls where her job is to create oxygen, is to give life in this other way, and it's bringing up a lot of those really hard memories. And so she stays up late, like for weeks on end, manically weaving. And it's just her way of kind of physicalizing that grief. And then, in just like a fit of rage, she destroys it. So there were 2 years leading up to this weaving happening in terms of writing, meeting with Pam, organizing it, and then it didn't get all put together until that day on set. And so I'm filming another couple scenes in a different room in this location while Pam is busy creating this weaving in this classroom space. So I'm like hyper focused on what we're doing, and then I walk into the classroom and I see it like all together. And like as many times as I imagined it, I was just absolutely stunned by the beauty of it, and stunned again by the idea that we just made this to destroy it for female rage, right? And that was definitely like such a big moment of wonder, and all of the work and the challenges that came with it felt so worth it to see it happen and to be a part of this like bigger story. The last idea, and this is one that I think keeps a lot of people, or a lot of people connect with in their religion, is this idea of purpose. So we all want to feel like our life has meaning, that we're working towards some big goal, that there's like a reason for it all, for all of the struggle, and that there's something great at the end. And in Christianity, of course, this is like heaven, right? If you follow these sort of like rules and standards for living, then you're rewarded at the end with heaven. One day, after Sunday school, my brother is 2 years older than me, so he was like in a different Sunday school class. So I had just done like the cotton ball lamb thing, super cute, lighthearted. But he comes out of his Sunday school class just like ghost white, like all of the blood had drained from his face, and he's probably 9 years old. I could tell something was wrong. And we get back into the car after we meet up with my parents, and they're like, Jordan, what happened in Sunday school? And he says, this is a direct quote, he said, I don't want to go to heaven. And my parents were like, what do you mean? You don't want to go to heaven? And he was like, Miss Mary was talking about heaven in Sunday school class today, and she said that we're all going to be up on this stage in God's choir, and we're going to have to sing forever and ever and ever and ever, and it never stops, and we never stop singing. Which is honestly like horrible, even if you love to sing, right? Like that freaks me out. And he was just really like shook up about it. And my parents had such a good answer, which I like stand by today, especially as like an adult working with children. I'm like, good on you. Like it was quick. They go, you know what, Jordan, that is Miss Mary's idea of heaven. Okay? That's Miss Mary's heaven. That doesn't have to be your heaven. So when we think about like our creative work and our purpose and our goal, like what is our heaven? What is our ideal way to work creatively? What is our ideal like outcome of our work? And I think it's really important, even if you think you know that, to like revisit it every so often. Like what is the most ideal, perfect heaven in our creative life? So these are a couple more pictures from Sunshine Girls where I felt like we were like really close, right? Obviously, the work is never perfect, and you never sort of, whatever you imagine it to be, it always like changes, sometimes for the better, right? But I feel like the biggest thing, the thing that I maybe feel the most proud of throughout production would be like the purpose and the intention behind it. So there were like a few things going into my feature that I knew I wanted to be true and I wouldn't compromise on. I knew that I wanted the cast and crew to have women and queer people in leadership roles. And I knew that I wanted my cast, especially who were playing queer people, to have connections to that. I knew that I wanted the process of it to be as joyful as possible, as kind as possible, and I wanted to remain friends with all of my collaborators throughout it, and that was absolutely achieved. And just because it's like part of my agenda here, when I talk about like wanting women and queer people on and off screen, here's why. And if you're paying attention, you already know, like the film industry is like very broken. So I'm very purposeful about choosing who to put in what roles. So this is from 2019, and it's like the top grossing films. But I can guarantee you on a local level, walk onto any 48-hour film festival set, walk onto any, like, well, Watkins died, right? But on any, like, film school set in general, and you'll still see men mostly in leadership roles in crew and as protagonists. So 2019, only 10.7% of directors were women, only 19.4% of writers, 24.3% of producers, and only 18.6% of films had characters from the LGBTQ community. And 40% of movies still fail the Bechdel test. And like the bar is really low, you guys. Like just two, not three, just two named women who talk to each other, even just one conversation that's not about a man. 40% of films still fail this. And so another kind of like cheeky intention that I had with Sunshine Girls is that I wanted to pass the reverse Bechdel test. So in my movie, there are never two named men who speak to each other about anything other than a woman, right? Which is just kind of like my way to fight back in like my banana sort of situation I have going on. So that kind of concludes this part where I just like talk to you. And now I'm going to turn it over to you guys and give you guys the opportunity to sort of brainstorm some ways you can bananify your work. So you can take any of these as prompts, so faith, community, ritual, wonder, or purpose. And I want you to try to think of like 3 just like tangible ways that you can bananify your spiritual practice, that you can rethink it or make it your own in your creative work. So you've got your little paper bananas, and you should have like a pen or a pencil. And I kind of want to end today with letting you guys kind of like think on that. And yeah, thank you so much for having me. This has been great.